Last week was the California Coastal Commission vote, and I had someone who works at SeaWorld who was tweeting me, which became, quite an irate conversation as it went on. But I said something like, these animals shouldn't be performing tricks in your marine circus. And he replied with, they only do behaviours that they naturally do in the wild, which struck me as the most absurd thing he could ever say.
Truly.
Because they wouldn't be begging for food in the wild, and they wouldn't be flipping up to a ball or, going on like the shore and doing a silly pose or have people standing on them. So have you ever seen any of this natural behaviour in the wild?
No, those are all trained behaviors coerced by the threat of deprivation of food if they do not. So it's a completely different setting. They can be very active out here, and that too is a kind of a cultural trait because some communities of orcas are much more active than others. Some very seldom breach or lobtail, slap their tails on the water, or spy hop, or any of those sort of acrobatic, athletic behaviors that we see. But the southern residents around here, around the San Juan Islands and in the waters of Washington and British Columbia, are very active. They're known as reaching a lot. But it's all on their own volition. It's all out of joy or out of some kind of maybe communication or shared moment with their family. We really don't know why, and there's no particular set of circumstances that correlates with that kind of activity. It could just pop up at any time. But to compare that with those routines that they are coerced into, it's not just being trained. The orcas are very smart, and they know what is wanted of them, and that there will be deprivation of food if they don't comply. So, they seem to be doing it willingly, and they don't have the kind of facial expressions, and it's only in extreme circumstances that they register their resistance or displeasure with what's going on. So most of the time it looks like they're having fun because they're breaching, they're active, but it's just a completely different situation than when they're in their family, in their natural habitat, and we, can overinterpret what it is because I don't know why they do all that activity. It's just exciting to watch, and it looks like they're enjoying themselves. It just looks like they're active because there's a joy of life there, and that is just completely different with the trained routines that they're forced to do in captivity.
And I think with them doing that in the wild, it's obviously their choice as well. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. Whereas in captivity, they have none of that.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I don't know how they are able to put up with that kind of domination all the time. It's so much different when you think about getting cues from their family and just responding to the mood of the moment with their family as they travel along and feeling good, and so breaching or lobtailing or all the things that they do compared to they have to do that sequence of activities to be able to be fed, and it's just a completely different situation.
It's very sad to see such a majestic animal and a huge animal like that being controlled by a human just because they've got a bucket of fish as well, because if they don't do it, then they may not get that.
Well, it is. It's terrible to see, and it's no wonder that they act out sometimes, that they strike back, as Tillicum did with Don Brancho and with two other individuals, and as so many have. We now see the long record of it. The wonder really is that they put up with it so long, especially Lolita in Miami, that she is somehow patient, that she just is able to accept and persevere and go on day after day after day. I'm sure that she knows that there is a better life that she came from and that she could go back to someday. but she just puts up with it. I don't understand her grace and her patience to be able to do that.
I think just speaking about Lolita, that image of how small her tank is and then the car park, that is quite a prominent image at the moment that has been going around for a while, and people are still so shocked at that. And I don't understand how they can justify keeping her in that really tiny tank on her own. She must have such a sad, lonely life, really.
Well, they either have themselves convinced or they're certainly trying to convince the public that it would be dangerous, that they have her best interest at heart, and that we would be risking her by returning her to where she was born and raised, essentially. Even though there's no particular stage or part of our plan to return her to her native waters that really poses any real risk. They don't say what it is that might cause her harm. They just say flat out it would probably kill her, and it doesn't make any sense, but it works for them. It keeps people from considering that. It confuses people.
I think that leads quite well on to that SeaWorld claim to rescue animals and rehabilitate them, and specifically Morgan, who was rescued on the condition that she could be released back into the wild as soon as possible. And within a few weeks of having her, they put her straight on show, and she's now in Spain, I think. Is Morgan still viable for release back with her family, or have SeaWorld completely ruined her chances?
I don't have any direct experience with Morgan, so I've been reading everything that Ingrid Visser and others have been saying about her, and it seems to me that she certainly could go back to a sea pen in Norway, and Ingrid and her colleagues have set aside a place and gotten the permission of the local authorities in northern Norway, a beautiful little location for a sea pen for her, which would be her natural waters, and she could be cared for right there. And after getting acclimatized and rebuilding her strength and stamina, her metabolic strength and health, the gate could be opened, and she could be allowed to move out into the North Atlantic and return anytime, knowing that there will be care and even provisioning, if necessary, for her right there. So she could have that life. There's no biological reason to deprive her of that life, and it would be much healthier for her. Whether she could rejoin her family or not is pretty hard to say. They would have to be in proximity and sense each other, hear each other. I've heard that she may have some hearing difficulties. I don't know if that's really true. That would need to be tested. But in any case, she could certainly live in a natural setting and come and go as she pleases. So that's entirely doable.
That's so sad that it's such in grasp that they've already got a place for her, and they won't let her go. And
I know.
And she could even, even if she didn't eventually sort of meet up with the rest of her family, she could obviously make new relationships because she hasn't been in there for her entire life. She still has some of those instincts, I imagine.
Right. It's a very different social system in the North Atlantic compared to here in Washington State, where the families are much more cohesive and bonded for life. And they probably are there too, but there's a lot of fission fusion, a lot of sort of mix and merge, and sort of a more general association pattern of the whole community rather than just the natural lines that meet up as they do here. So it may be easier for her to sort of be accepted and adopted by other orcas up there just because they're not so tightly bonded for life as what we see here.
Well, it sounds like she's perfect candidate for going back there. Even if it's just in the sea pen, it would be a much better life than what she's living now.